Hello, welcome to GH Addition Math and Science Clinic for BEC candidates. We are live on Sundays from 3 to 6 p.m. In today's lesson, we'll try and round up on agriculture and plant life. In the previous lesson, we spoke about pollination, we spoke about the fly and its parts, and the rest. In today's lesson, we take a different turn. So we'll be looking at the life cycle of flowering plants, or we'll continue in the life cycle. Then we'll look at vegetable production. Now, let's talk about germination. Whenever you put a seed into soil, you'll expect it to grow. Now, it's not every seed that would grow. The seed has to be viable. So, by the definition of germination, it is the process whereby a viable seed starts to develop into a young plant or seedling. The viable seed starts to develop into a young plant or seedling. That process is what we call germination. Now then, what then is the viable seed? So a viable seed germinates under suitable conditions. A viable seed germinates under suitable conditions. So there are some conditions that a plant or a seed needs to germinate. Now these are, like we said earlier, a viable seed, the presence of water or moisture, a suitable temperature or warmth, and then the presence of oxygen. These four things are relevant for every seed to germinate. Now, in this process of germination, we can look at some experiments that would help us determine whether truthfully or truly the conditions that we have stipulated or mentioned are relevant for growth. Now, the key thing for any kind of germination to take place is a viable seed. So the viable seed should have everything in the seed intact, not diseased. The plumule is intact. The cotyledons are intact. That makes that seed a viable seed. Now, if you want to test in an experiment for the various factors that affect germination, you would have to have what we call the control. The control always is the set up the experiment that would have every condition met, and at the end of the day we expect that it has a successful outcome. Then our test is the experiment in which we will try and eliminate one or two of the conditions, usually one, and see if it is really relevant for that experiment to take place. So the first thing that we want to look at is the presence of water. Is water really important? So in such a setup, you'd find a suitable container, put a dry cotton in it, and put a seed on it. Then give it suitable temperature and allow oxygen to pass over it. Like I said, as for the viable seed, is constant. You realize that after about 7 days, the seed wouldn't have germinated, simply because you gave it no water. There was no moisture for the seed to germinate. So that's an experiment that would show that water is relevant for germination to take place. Then you can have another setup, suitable temperature or warmth. Now, it's warmth that generates germination. A cold temperature doesn't cause germination to take place. So, in causing an organism to grow, you would want to check whether truthfully warmth is relevant. So in this second experiment, instead of you giving the plant warmth, you would first give it moisture. You put the cotton in water, you put the seed on it, you put it in your suitable container. Now oxygen will certainly pass over it, but in this instance you put it in a deep freezer or in a fridge. The temperature in a fridge is not conducive. It will not cause the various reactions that takes place in the seed for it to germinate, to take place. Now in this experiment, after 7 days, you realize that no, the seed couldn't grow. And it's simply because you didn't give it warmth. That is the second experiment. Now in another experiment, you want to check whether oxygen is really relevant for germination to take place. Now to check this, you provide all the 4 conditions to a particular seed. Then in the other, you would cause the seed to have no access to oxygen. How do you do this? You first boil water. Now when you boil water, all the oxygen is removed. The dissolved oxygen in the water is removed. You boil water and cool it. Now when you do not stir the water and it is cooled at a stagnant state, no oxygen goes into it. Then you would have the cotton, put the seed on it, then put water, the boiled, cooled water on it. That's air or oxygen expelled. Then you put oil on top. The oil is to prevent further absorption of oxygen into the water so that the seed would have access. Now you realize that after the 7 days, no growth would have occurred simply because the seed didn't get oxygen. And you know oxygen is relevant for respiration of organisms. So you realize that after the 7 days, there's no seed growth. Now we've been talking about a viable seed, a viable seed, a viable seed. Let's look at the parts of a seed. So there is a tester or the seed coat, the outer portion. So let's think about a bean seed. Beans, the bean. When you put it in water, the outer covering that you can remove, that protects the inner part. That is the tester or the seed coat. Then there is the hilum. The hilum is a scar found on the seed, and it is the point of attachment of the seed to the stalk or ovary walls. When the seed was attached to the ovary wall, that was the point of attachment. Then you have what we call the micropyle. The micropyle is a tiny hole that allows water and air into the growing embryo. So it is breathing, and it needs a means of breathing, and that's the micropyle. That is what is used for breathing. Then we come to the plumule. The plumule develops into the shoot. So a viable seed needs the plumule. Without the plumule, the viable seed cannot develop into the final plant or seedling. So it will need a plumule which develops into the shoot. Then we have the radicle. The radicle also develops into the true root. So if the radicle is absent, it means that your seed is not viable and it cannot develop. Then we have the cotyledon or the seed leaf. The cotyledon or the seed leaf. Now this is seen as a kidney-shaped part of the plant or the seed, and it manufactures and stores food for the seed. So take the beans seed. You can split it into 2 halves. One of the halves has a kidney-shaped part, and that part is called the cotyledon or the seed leaf. Then we have the endosperm. The endosperm is found within the cotyledon, and it's a tissue for storing food. It's a tissue for storing food. All right. So we have mentioned a seed and we know of a fruit. Now let's try and distinguish between these two. These can be easily asked of you in an examination. Now the fruit is formed from the ovary. The fruit is formed from the ovary. So every fruit is formed from the ovary, whilst the seed is formed from the ovule. The ovule is within the ovary, so the seed is inside the ovary, or the seed is found in the ovary, and that is the ovule. So it's the ovule that develops into the seed, while the ovary itself develops in the fruit. So as always, the ovule, which is the seed, is found in the ovary. It's found in the ovary. So that's that. Now also we are saying that the fruit has two scars. Two scars. The fruit has two scars on it. It has two scars on it. Whereas the seed has only one scar. The seed has only one scar. So for the fruit, the point that it attaches to the plant, there's a scar, and the opposite side where the ovary tapers out, it's also another scar. While the seed has only one scar, that is the point of attachment of the ovules into the ovary. That's the only scar that is found on it. Now we are also saying that the fruit consists of seeds. So inside the fruit, you would find seeds. Whereas the seed consists of an embryo. So inside the seed, you find an embryo. Inside the seed, you find an embryo. Now the fruit has the outer portion called a pericarp. And the pericarp is generated from the ovarian wall. We are saying that the fruit is formed from the ovary, so the outermost portion of the fruit is the pericarp. So therefore, the pericarp is also made from the ovarian wall or the ovary wall. The outermost portion of the ovary is the ovarian wall. So the pericarp that is in the fruit is made from the ovarian wall. Then on the other side, we have testa. The testa, that's the outermost portion of the seed, is formed from integuments. Now the integuments are within the seed. So the integument is within the ovule. The testa is made from these integuments. Testa is made from these integuments. So these are the differences between a fruit and the seed, and you should be able to remember these easily. You just have to remember one set, then use it for the opposite set. Great. Now we come to vegetable production, but I first want to look at crops in general. Crops in general. So classification of crops. Classification of crops. Now crops can be classified based on the growth cycle or the lifespan. How long the plant stays can be used to classify it. Now crops can also be classified based on their uses. What are they used for? Are they oils? Are they legumes? Are they for fruit? Are they for as vegetables? Are they for beverages? Whichever. So you can either classify crops as based on growth cycle or lifespan, or based on uses. Based on uses. Now let's look at classification based on the growth cycle or the lifespan. So we have the annual crops, we have the biennial crops, and we have the perennial crops. Annual, biennial, perennial. Now the annual crops. The annual crops complete their life cycle in one season. So within the rainy season, from beginning of the season to the end, within 3, 4, 5, 6 months, it is done and it is ready to be consumed. Meanwhile, once they produce, they don't live or they don't survive that period again. They become extinct, they do not exist, they die off. So every year you need to replant them for them to produce for you that intended outcome. Then you have the biennial crops. The biennial crops. Now these ones run within 2 life cycles. Examples can include carrot, cabbage, beetroot. So two seasons. It completes its life cycle within 2 seasons. So examples are carrot. It starts from one season and is ready in the next season. Then we have the perennial crops. The perennial crops. Now crops such as cocoa, coconut, oil palm, cashew, they are grown once, but every year or every season they produce their fruits, and these are called perennial crops. So this grows year after year or season after season without being replaced. So yes, you have taken it off, or you have grown it once, but you do not have to replant it again every year. No, that is not the intention or how it's intended to be. You plant it once, and every season or every year you do your harvest. Now we come to classification based on uses. Classification based on uses. Now we have the cereals. The cereals like rice and maize are cereals, and these are a major source of carbohydrates in our part of the world. So we have the legumes. The legumes like beans, groundnuts, they are used to make your stews, your soups, etc. So beans and groundnuts are legumes. Then we have vegetables, vegetables. Vegetables can include cucumber, carrot, spinach, etc. Now, these are vegetables because they are not your regular foods, but they are used to spice up that other food. Then we have the root tubers. So they are roots and they are tubers. Example, cassava and yam, they are under the soil. They are part of the foods that are regularly eaten within our terrain. Root tubers, cassava and yam. Then we have stem tubers, can also include the yam, and also potato. They are within the middle of the plant. So potato is an example of that. Then we have edible fruits and nuts. Fruits include pawpaw, nuts include tiger nuts. Then we have the beverages. Now the beverages include coffee, cocoa. These are beverages. You can even have the tea plant, which is also a beverage. Then we have spices, which includes ginger, includes cinnamon, and the rest. Then we have some for drugs. Drugs include all the plants that are used for herbal medicine. They are all for drugs. Then oils, we have oil palm being part of it. You can have sunflower because you produce sunflower oil. You can have soya because you have soya bean oil. So all these are oils. Then we have latex. Latex is what is used to make your foam. Now, latex includes the rubber plant, and the rubber plant is a major source of material for latex. Then we have fiber. Fiber is used to make the sack. The brown sack in which cocoa is packed is made of this material, fiber. Then forage for other animals, that is the herbivores, to eat. Then ornamentals. As for the ornamentals, it's very relevant. It doesn't go into man, but the output with respect to the pressure that man goes through daily, these are a means of cushioning our stressed lifestyle. So these are ornamentals. That's what they are used. Now, there are some factors that you need to consider in producing a crop. The first one is the climate and the soil factors. It's not all crops that can grow in terrain. For example, apples do not grow in Ghana because it needs a cold environment. So it's not every crop that can grow in a particular climate. Also, there are soil factors that are relevant. For example, rice prefers water, so it will prefer a marshy area where you can store water. Or if it is irrigation, you need to always have water around it. There are other crops that would also not want so much water. For example, your vegetables, if you put carrots in a marshy area, it will rot out. So all these factors are very relevant, and you need to look at them when deciding on which crop plant to plant and which location you are going to do that. Then also the land or the site selection. You need to find the right location for your crop production. If you need irrigation, the location of the irrigation body or the source of water should be close. Where you would stay and do the crop production is very key, because if you stay far from the location, it can also affect your ability to reach out to that site. Then selection of the seed or the propagation material. Like we said, you always need a viable seed. You can't waste all your energy planting seeds which are not viable and expect to have a harvest. And then the kind of propagation material that you need to is also dependent on that. Now, the land preparation. If the land is a virgin place, you would need to clear stumps, you need to clear some trees before it will be readily available. It's a land that you've been using, you may need to plow with a tractor to turn the soil afresh and then make it ready for use. If it's a land that needs burning, you need to do that. So you'd have to think about how you are going to prepare that land for the farming project. Then another key thing is the time of planting. Crops grow within particular seasons. If you plant at the wrong time of the season, you may miss out, and by the time that you need water to get the crop to grow, the rains would have stopped and there would not be any water or rain to get it to run. So the time of planting is key. Then we also need to look at the method of propagation, as we mentioned. The propagation material has been mentioned, but the method of propagation based on the selected seed of propagation material. So if it's seeds, you know how to plant it. If it is the stem, you know how to plant it. So you need to think about all that. Then cultural practices. If you take, for example, your vegetables, there are lots of cultural practices you need to observe. For example, there are times that you need to thin out, that is, pick out some of the seedlings because they are clustered. So you need to think about that. There are times that you need to pick the young grass growing within. So you need to look at the cultural practice. There are times that you'd have to water, and it needs water at the right timing. So all these practices are very relevant. Then you need to also think about the harvesting. How are you going to harvest it? What is the harvesting procedure? What exactly do you harvest? If it is the seeds, how do you go about harvesting? If it is the fruits, how do you go about harvesting? So the harvesting process or procedure is very key in deciding on which crop plant to engage in. Now, after harvesting, you need to store, and storage is one of the challenging parts in our locality, or the challenging principles or factors that people do not consider. So you go to the market, you find out that so much of tomatoes has been harvested, but post-harvest losses. When there's a tomato glut, you go and then much of the tomatoes is spoiled. While there are means of storing these and making sure they become useful to us. If it is ripe plantain, you go and lots of them have gotten spoiled on the market and they find no use to it. So there should be the thought of how you are going to store your produce for a longer period. Then the final key thing is marketing. As always, that is what many people think at the last point. but that probably should even be the first thing to look at. Has your product a market? Do you have lots of people making requests for it? How would you sell this product outside to people? So you need to think about the market. Is it a produce that I'm going to sell locally in Ghana, or I'm going to export to other countries? These are very key factors that you need to look at. So for you to have a successful crop production, you need to think about your climate and the soil. You need to look at the land or the site for production. You need to know the kind of seeds you are selecting or the propagation material. You have to do the right land preparation for the production to take place. The time of planting of your product or the crop is very key. Then the method of propagation, how the selected product or the selected propagation material can be propagated or is propagated. Then the cultural practices surrounding that particular crop is also very key. Then the harvesting process or the procedure for harvesting. Then you ask yourself, do you have a storage for it? And then how are you going to market this product? All right, so we'll pause here and I will continue at an opportune time. Thank you for your time and see you at the next lesson.